Hey everybody, my name is Caroline Kobzanski. I'm a member of the Chicago Tribune Guild.
Recording in progress.
We want to thank everybody for coming and hearing about why we are fighting today for a fair contract from Alden Global Capital. Our unit chair, Mateline Buckley, is having a little bit of technical difficulties, but we did want to welcome everyone. We are also doing this press conference across the street from the Freedom Center, which is why you might hear a little bit of background noise. Mateline, are you on now?
Yeah, thank you. My headphones disconnected for a second. But yeah, good morning, everybody. Thanks so much for coming. We're, of course, here today because more than 200 journalists at Tribune Publishing Properties have walked off the job for more than 24 hours today. We've taken this historic and unprecedented step because we're seeking a fair contract that recognizes the value we bring to our newspapers and our communities. We've been fighting for about 5 years. We're fighting for fair pay and working conditions so that we can continue to produce the impactful journalism that our talented workers are known for. But despite our very reasonable proposals to our owner, Alden Global Capital is intent on stripping away our long-held 401k match, which amounts to a pay cut for members, and has thus far failed to rectify years of stagnant and inequitable wages. So we are here today as a show of force to show the company that our labor is essential to their business model. So now I will introduce John Schloyd, president of the News Guild CWA.
Good morning, folks. This is so exciting. This is a huge day, and I am so pumped. I'm going to try not to break my desk in half by slamming my fist on my table because I am just so pumped. Actually, behind me, you can see it on my bookshelf, is an original Union Yes poster that I've had on my bookshelf for years. It is from the Chicago Tribune when y'all first organized, because I was at the LA Times and we helped y'all organize. And y'all spread a wave of organizing across Tribune more than 5 years ago, which is a wild amount of time to be fighting for a first contract. Today is a major escalation and is a powerful, powerful signal by the America's journalists across Tribune that now is the time for a fair contract. Now is the time for fair pay. Now is the time for health insurance that is affordable. Now is the time for a 401k match so we can have a damn retirement. Too many journalists across the United States live paycheck to paycheck, and it shouldn't be that way, especially when you have ownership that is a hedge fund. They are siphoning out all the money off of the backs of all of these journalists who are living paycheck to paycheck, and many of them have to have other jobs. I mean, some people aren't even able to join the picket in Chicago today because they have other part-time jobs to just compensate what they need to do to have a household and provide for their families. So I'm really proud of all of the journalists across Tribune in Chicago, in Allentown, in Orlando, in Tidewater, all across the US for standing up today and demanding a fair contract. Today you show up for each other, and this is what a union's really all about. It's not some faraway building in another city. A union is a decision. It's a verb. It's a decision to stand up for yourself and for your colleagues. And taking a labor action, going on strike for 24 hours is the biggest way that you can say to the company that you demand respect, and you demand dignity, and you demand fair pay in this contract. So it's also as journalists, it's also our ethical obligation. Journalists are supposed to seek truth and report it. Well, that's what we're doing every damn day when we're going to city council meetings, or we're going to cover the courts, or we're covering the school boards in America. We are seeking that truth and providing it out to our communities who need that to have a functioning democracy. We go out and we minimize harm. And today we do that fight to minimize harm because we're fighting for our underpaid colleagues who might be underpaid based on their race or their gender because the company has created that inequity. We also fight to be accountable. That is an ethical obligation, and fight to be transparent. Journalists across Tribune Publishing, you are the watchdogs of democracy's flame. Without you, our democracy does not function at the state, at the local, and at the federal level. And as I said, one of our top ethical concerns is to hold power to account. And that means holding our own employers to account. So today we do that by going out on strike and calling out Alden Global Capital, which is a vicious hedge fund that is hell-bent on destroying America's newsrooms. And it's pretty clear what they're doing. By eliminating journalists all across the United States, they are then doing other vicious things in those communities. It's the equivalent of silencing the people who make sure that we are rooting out corruption and holding power to account. By silencing and eliminating those jobs, they are then turning around in communities and buying up mobile home parks and raising the rent on folks who live in mobile homes. They're cutting off the water. They're buying up America's bus stations. They bought up almost every single Greyhound station in the United States in every major city. Working class people depend on those buses to get across the United States. They buy those up and they shut them down to flip them and turn them into expensive parking buildings. They did that to Tribune Tower. The corporate greed in media is out of control. And hedge funds are at the core of that corporate greed. It's time for us to push back, and that is what we're doing here today. And everyone across Tribune Publishing is joining your family of America's journalists who have decided enough is enough and have taken things into their own hands and gone out on the street and gone out on strike. Just this year, the LA Times went out. Condé Nast went out. San Antonio Report went out. A nonprofit newsroom that didn't even have a union officially went on strike because they had a layoff of one of their colleagues. Just last week, your colleagues that are at the Alden-owned New York Daily News, the New York's hometown paper, went out on strike. And at Forbes, just ended their 3-day strike on Monday. America's journalists are demanding more. They're demanding a fair paycheck. They're demanding a retirement. They're demanding health care. Because when we stand up as America's journalists and fight for ourselves and fight for our colleagues, we're fighting also for our community so that they have a voice, so that they have responsibility, so that they have accountability, so that they're not going to be screwed over by politicians in corrupt offices that are just taking out their tax dollars and misspending them or misappropriating them. America's journalists are fighting for American democracy. We're fighting against corporate greed at its core. So I am so proud of every single Tribune Publishing journalist today standing up and fighting against Alden Global Capital, which is a corporate hedge fund and full of so much greed that is just hell-bent on destroying America's newsrooms. We can't let it happen. We need the community to stand up, support these striking journalists. If you're watching and you're not one of these journalists, support them. Don't cross the picket line. Don't visit these publications today. And donate to their GoFundMe. We have more power than we know, and when we stand up and we fight, we can win.
Thank you, John. We're going to pass.
Hi, I'm Dave Mulcahy. Thanks, John. Thanks, Carson. I'm editor at Tribune. I'm an editor at Tribune Content Agency. I'm co-chair of the TCA Guild and a bargainer for the Tribune Publishing Joint Table. The extent to which Alden Global Capital is pauperizing the journalists who work for Tribune Publishing was brought home to me shortly after I joined the bargaining committee. Driving through a small town in northern Michigan, I drove past a Wendy's. And on the huge sign out front, it announced it was hiring. Starting wage, $24 an hour. Now, I knew the wage figures for my unit, and the wage Wendy's was advertising was well above what several of my colleagues were making, and just a couple bucks shy of the median wage. After years of bargaining, during which inflation has eroded our paychecks by some 20%, Alden has offered us 2 bonuses of $1,500 over the life of the contract. That figure doesn't even make up for the 401k match it proposes to take away from us forever. For years, the journalists who've worked at Tribune Publishing have been told to make sacrifices. We've been furloughed. We've been asked to forego raises, to take pay cuts, to pick up the work left behind by colleagues who were let go in layoffs and buyouts, to do more with less, because the viability of our newspapers has depended on us doing so. The wage freezes, the downsizing was always presented to us as a question of our enterprise's very survival. It turns out that's an effective way to get at journalists. We're not in it for the money. In fact, we're in it despite the money, but we got to live. We believe in the indispensable civic role of the Fourth Estate, and so we grumbled about it and got on with it. Yet it was not a shared sacrifice. We watched as the owners paid themselves fat dividends. When Alden Global Capital took a large stake in Tribune Publishing under the last ownership regime, we knew what to expect. We'd read about its vulture investing. We'd read about the high profit margins it rakes off publications it owns. At the bargaining table, Alden's lawyers like to put on the poor mouth. Have we seen the price of newsprint? Have we seen trends in circulation? Have we seen ad revenues? Yes, we've seen them. We've been watching them closely for decades. And we can only surmise that Alden is not as concerned as it makes out about these things because it keeps buying newspapers. It bought a big one in July. In the course of our contract campaign, we've uncovered considerable disparities in our pay in my unit and other units. Chicago Tribune, for example, found that journalists of color typically make $10,000 less than the median salaries of their white counterparts. And then in the newsroom, typically make $20,000 less than the median salaries of their male colleagues. These disparities have become toxic to the morale of our members. Our bargaining proposals have consistently offered moderate and equitable solutions to our members' economic stress and our need for fairness. And we have been met with a wall of indifference. And that's why we're here on this beautiful Chicago spring day. And we also say no to Alden's plans to pauperize us in retirement. And I would like to pass to my colleague Tess Kenny to say more about the plans to take away our 401k match.
Hey everyone, my name is Tess Kenny, and I'm with the Suburban Chicago Tribune unit. I'm also the sole full-time reporter for the Naperville Sun, one of several suburban papers that helps the Chicago Tribune cover communities from Waukegan to northern Indiana. I'm here to speak with you about how important retaining our 401k match is for someone like me, who's 24 years old and craves financial security somewhere in the distant future, to those that have retained this benefit for years and shouldn't have to have their retirement plans derailed in the name of cost saving. First and foremost, losing the 401k match is a pay cut. The reality is that if the company took away our 401k match, it'd equate to a 4% pay cut for most of us. But unlike a straight up pay cut, dropping our match is a recurring loss. It compounds over an employee's lifetime. It's a cut to our future. And it overwhelmingly harms the young staff across our papers. I can tell you firsthand that planning for retirement can feel like a far-off abstraction when you're still finding your footing in your career after college. But every piece of advice I've ever read about saving for retirement says start early. And with the match, it makes setting aside a small portion of our already meager paychecks a no-brainer. You know, I told my mom I'd be speaking about this today, and she told me that she started putting money into her retirement when she was 21. She was living in Boston, just starting out at her first job out of college, and her company had a 3-to-1 match. She started putting in the minimum amount and continued for years. Decades later, as she and my dad eye retirement, my mom said that she's glad she made that choice and is relieved the company gave her that option. Working for Tribune Publishing is the first time that a 401k match has even been an option for me. I started working for the Naperville Sun in September, but before that, I was with the Monterey Herald, a small paper in Central Coast, California. Like the Tribune, the Herald is owned by Alden. The difference is that at the Herald, the 401k match had already been stripped away. I was on the bargaining table in Monterey before I left last summer, and we were working to get that match back. But Alden's response, and every proposal we put forward when I was there at least, was no. It's a shame and a slap in the face that Alden is determined to see or keep the 401k match gone at every paper that it touches. It's a signal that we, those that get its papers, its product out every day, aren't worth the investment. And how do you attract or retain employees that way? It's not right, and it's certainly not within the bounds of a fair contract. And with that, I pass it off to Dave Rocknick to speak about how endless bargaining with Alden has been for the past 5 years.
Thanks, Tess. I'm Dave Rocknick. I'm co-chair for the Tribune Design Production Unit, and I've been a bargainer pretty much from the beginning. We started bargaining these contracts across Tribune Publishing in 2019. That's more than a half a decade ago. A lot has happened since then. We weathered COVID-19, kind of. Russia invaded Ukraine. Tony La Russa returned to the White Sox. He left, and he's back again. Yet somehow we still don't have a deal. Throughout this process, this employer has treated us with utter contempt. They've delayed, slow-walked, and obstructed at the bargaining table every millimeter of the way. In most cases, we've spent years fighting just to keep what we have, with the company fiercely clinging to every bit of power and every single penny. We unionize to have a voice, better pay, and better working conditions. In return, the company insists on targeting our modest retirement contributions and keeping our lowest paid colleagues in poverty. We've had enough. That's why we're on strike today across Tribune Publishing. And I'm proud to stand together with my colleagues to tell the company that it is long past time to get serious and treat us with respect. Now I'll pass it over to my bargaining colleague, Gavin, in Norfolk, Virginia.
My name is Gavin Stone. I'm a co-chair of the Tidewater Media Guild and a breaking news reporter at the Virginian Pilot. I joined the bargaining team last spring after about a year and a half of our guild being virtually dormant, after being one of the strongest in our bargaining unit. And that's what Alden would love to see happen again. They want to wait us out. They withhold the pay we deserve and allow our working conditions to get worse and worse so that we do the dirty work for them and leave on our own volition. That way, they never have to answer for their treatment of us and the damage they're doing to our communities. They don't function like a normal business that is successful by retaining staff and providing quality products to their customers. They profit by cutting away at the heart of what we do as journalists. But our resolve has never been stronger, and the public is beginning to see the rot caused by Alden. We had 101 full-time staff members when we certified as a union in September 2018, and we're now at 38. That's a 62% reduction in staff over almost 5.5 years. Those departures included nearly all of our top union leadership, as well as irreplaceable institutional knowledge and talent that kept our paper relevant. Throughout these long negotiations, our staff has continued to strive to provide the best coverage possible with significantly less support, and for many, no raises during that time. This can only be done for so long before they have to make choices in the best interest of themselves and their families, and we see the evidence all around us. Many of the public relations specialists that work in this area are former pilot and press staff who saw an opportunity to get more money for less demanding work, and they took it. The effects of this are that where we used to have one reporter covering schools for each city in Hampton Roads, which was about 7 reporters, we now have 2 covering the entire region's school systems along with its many colleges. On the business beat, we had a total of about 20 reporters between the pilot and press in the late 90s, and now we have 3. The result is that parents know less about what's happening at their children's schools, businesses get less organic exposure, and customers know less about the businesses in their communities. For those that have stayed, this has meant ever-expanding roles, longer hours, and a grimmer and grimmer future. This is intentional. Alden wants us to do more work with the same pay. For readers across the board, this means less local news you can use and less connection to your community. In our personal lives, we've each had to make sacrifices in order to make ends meet doing the job we love. I myself have a part-time job at a local bar, and I do freelance copywriting on the side. One of our photographers does freelance portraits. Our others sell their art or creative writing, and saving money is nearly impossible, especially with rising inflation and housing costs. Each of us knows the mental health effects of ever-increasing precarity and the day-to-day financial strain of trying to live within the tight window that Alden gives us. We can't keep doing that forever. We want to be able to retire, to raise families, to own a home, to have basic security in our livelihoods. But if Alden is allowed to continue to behave this way, our communities and our democracy will face an existential crisis. Research has shown that as newspapers lose staff, production goes up and voter participation goes down. The time to stand up and fight back is now. And I'll hand it over to Christoval in Orlando.
Hi, everyone. My name is Christoval Rees. I am a criminal justice reporter at the Orlando Sentinel and a steward for the Sentinel Guild. As someone who's been at the Sentinel for 5 years, I remember being told about the glory days of when we had hundreds in our newsroom. The pay wasn't perfect, but stories were being properly covered and folks were taken care of, to the point where many thought a union was unnecessary. But by the time we first announced our union in 2020, we did so with just slightly more than 50 people. These days, we're down to about 30, with the same duty as always, to report the news. Many of those 30 remaining reporters haven't seen a raise in decades until recently, but inflation in Florida and rising housing costs continues to price us out of a community we love. And those who had long had enough and left were never replaced. Think about what that means. We no longer have a reporter to cover tech. Our criminal justice team was downsized, leaving the task of holding our largest law enforcement agencies accountable to just 2 reporters. Coverage of tourism, Orlando's biggest industry, is being shared among several other reporters. And El Sentinel, our de facto liaison with the region's Latina community, is gone. The Sentinel is slowly but surely losing touch with the community it serves. The reporters aren't to blame, as we're told to indefinitely do more with less. And our editors and managers are just cogs in the machine and feel the pinch as we do. Responsibility is squarely on Alden. Our people are leaving in droves for better pay and work conditions, and they're not being replaced. Then we're told there's no money to cover the gaps and are asked to pick up the slack, all while Alden refuses to properly pay its remaining workers and threatening to take our 401k matches. This is unsustainable, and we've had enough of watching local news be killed before our eyes. And now I'll pass it on to Grayson in Allentown.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Grayson Goltzer, and I'm a general news reporter for the Morning Call newspaper in Allentown, Pennsylvania. It is extremely empowering to see hundreds of people from so many different walks of life join together in support of robust journalism, institutions, public accountability, and information. For over 5 years, we have tried to work with Alden Global Capital to achieve incredibly reasonable requests so that we can continue serving the readers in our communities, including raises to mitigate the effects of inflation and to address wage inequities. In fact, in December, multiple publications highlighted that Pennsylvania was the worst state in the country for inflation of grocery prices. But the company declined. They would rather give us a handful of meager bonuses. They would rather cut our 401k match without any thought for how that would affect our livelihoods. They would rather tell us that if we don't like our wages, we should get another job. If we don't fight that attitude, journalists will have no choice but to find another occupation. This turns healthy newsrooms into smaller newsrooms, which turn into struggling newsrooms until they finally become dead newsrooms. At the Morning Call, we've already been bleeding so many wonderful journalists in the last couple of years, including multiple staffers who left for a direct competitor. The shrinking of our staff means we fail to cover every story that we should, even when we do our best to cover the responsibilities of positions the company refuses to fill, both for writers and photographers. Where will this leave our readership, who so often rely on the press to highlight the problems in our towns and hold the powerful in check? They will become vulnerable and less informed in a time when it's so important to advocate for each other. My colleagues and I refuse for this to become reality. We are fighting for our rights, including the right to fight for our readers. I will now pass over to Will Lee at the Chicago Tribune Guild.
Hello, everyone. This is William Lee with the Chicago Tribune. I've been with the Chicago Tribune for 14 years. I am an excited Tribune Guild member, and I'm happy to talk to you today. I'm beyond proud to stand with some of the finest journalists and technical workers in the country to take the stand against corporate greed. No reporter wants to be the story. But we must sound the alarm against money gouging tactics that are threatening the press when the public is being fed a constant stream of misinformation. It is not an accident or a coincidence that the nation's biggest newsrooms and American labor in general are staging work stoppages and walkouts. At a time when newspaper literacy is at an all-time low and media faces constant attacks, journalists would rather be calling sources instead of publicly advocating for their jobs or speaking with one voice to say that we're being squeezed and our pay cut for the sake of greedy businessmen who would gladly choose profit over public service. As I stand here, I feel more than ever like my grandfather who saw the falling of Bronzeville in Chicago. It's about seeing a glorious time fall to rubble, and that's exactly what we're dealing with. Not that long ago, the Tribune covered nearly every murder that occurred. We covered murders, even in short briefs, as there's something in the way of information for mourners and survivors. We had a pool of talented graphic designers and videographers who greatly improved the quality of the paper. But modern journalists face two equally terrible situations: serving at the mercy of toxic owners with political ideologies that wish to express their views in the publication, or as is our case, we're owned by a hedge fund that looks squarely at profit and is completely indifferent to its suffering. The Tribune I joined in 2009, though mired in bankruptcy thanks to haphazard leadership, still maintained its prestige. It was the home of Pulitzer Prize winners, influential writers, well-respected foreign correspondents, and the largest writing staff in the Midwest. Our photographers are some of the very best in the country. It was one of those rare workplaces where even a busy colleague would stop what they were doing to lend a hand and make sure you were all set. A reporting job at the Tribune, it was a coveted spot, and one that I spent most of my adult life trying to get to. There were other differences too. The Tribune was among the vanguard when it came to breaking news reporting. As an overnight reporter, I kept a close eye on the city's skyrocketing homicide numbers. We covered nearly every homicide to come across our desk and every crime that went to the court case. That is no longer true. Our woefully understaffed paper has numerous job offerings on file, unfilled. We need a food writer, we need a cop reporter, we need copy editors. Believe me, I need a copy editor. I know part of our newsroom that are being considered negligent. I was personally told that copy editors were not. What's most frustrating is that our owners seem unconcerned both for the hard work that we do and have no interest in being the best. I came to the Tribune to be part of the best journalists in the city. Journalists who showed me that the perks of the job were nice, but it was the work that endured. What sharpens my resolve is knowing that we're putting up a good fight. We're not here fighting over meager crumbs for ourselves. Oh no. This is the battle of the 21st century, the problem of our times. Hedge funds, private investors, corporations cutting jobs, eliminating benefits, and producing inferior work products without any social cost to them. I've had many opportunities to work at other publications. Do you know why I haven't left? Because there's never been a job I've been offered that I love as much as I love this job. The people of Chicago deserve a cut above. We make it clear to Alden that we cannot and will not stand by and let them cheapen our brand for personal gain. It's time for Chicago to put them on notice. These destructive outsiders must learn the real Chicago. Take care of your people before your people take care of you. And with that, I pass it back to Mateline Buckley.
Sorry about that. Turns out doing a press conference in a park is harder than you would think. But yeah, thank you everybody for coming. We can take questions.
Do people want to drop questions in the Q&A? Carson, are you seeing any questions? This is a call full of journalists.
Looks like they're starting to roll in now. We've got a lot. Well, I guess why don't we start with David Goldman's question? What next?
Yeah, I can take this. We're back at the bargaining table in a couple weeks, mid-February, and we hope that the company will have heeded the very strong warning that we're sending them today with this walkout, and we very much hope they'll come to the table with some reasonable proposals that we can actually bargain over. And if they don't, we will continue to escalate.
I have a simple answer to that. What next is give us a proposal that does not touch our 401k match. I'm telling you, leave it alone. And let's talk about wages. The moderate proposals that we've made. We can move on that, but we need a partner at the bargaining table that's serious, because we're serious.
Okay, our next question up is, hey there, can you articulate how you would intend today's action to translate into concrete advances?
Our intention with today's action is to show the company that a pair of meager $1,500 bonuses is not an acceptable wage proposal. We are looking to make them propose a real wage scale that adjusts for the cost of living in Chicago and in all the other markets where our workers are reporting. And we intend to force them to give us something we can actually consider. Oh, and I'm Caroline from the Chicago Tribune Guild.
Part of what we're doing today is taking what we know and what we've been struggling with for years and bringing it to the broader public. Because when we've been bargaining our contracts, it's hard for people outside of our workplaces to know what we're doing. Part of the reason why we've invited the press to this, and why we've invited our labor allies and the general public, is because people need to see how cynical the company that owns these enterprises is. It does not need the money that it will get by scraping back our 401k matches. It does not need it. There's a lot we don't know about them because it's a hedge fund. What we learn, about the money that it takes in and the way it does business is largely from court filings. When there are droogs in the private equity space, are suing them over some deal. It's very hard to know what Alden Global Capital is looking at on its balance sheets. But we know that it's pretty big. The space right across the river where it has printed and distributed the paper for decades, they just were able to sell the lease rights to that for $160 million. That figure may not be, somebody could correct me on that figure. They're taking a lot of money. And what we're asking for is barely going to make a dent in that. And that's why we're saying, people need to know just how cynical this company is at the bargaining table. And spreading that message, which all of you can do here, is really going to help our ability to protect these incredibly valuable journalistic enterprises and continuing to do the work that we do in all of the cities and all of the metropolitan areas that we serve.
And I just wanted to say, in terms of how this action is going to translate to meaningful change at the bargaining table, this is just showing them that our members are behind us, that we can coordinate this at a mass scale, that we can keep doing this, that our communities are behind us and willing to put money behind us to support our fight in this. And yeah, I mean, Alden has not seen this before, and we're trying to show them what we can do, and show that, you know, this nickel and diming stuff is not going to fly. They're just going to keep having terrible papers and keep having negative headlines, and eventually, I mean, we're going to keep going as long as it takes. So that's what this is all about.
The other thing that I just add to all those amazing comments from the rank and file journalists here who work every single day to make sure that our communities are informed, is that this is part of a larger movement of America's journalists standing up against corporate greed, right? Alden Global Capital is a hedge fund right now actually begging members of Congress for the passage of a bill that would allow them to get money from Google and Facebook. Right now, there are no limitations on that money to make sure that it goes into the pockets of working journalists who power these news organizations. Alden Global Capital, the hedge fund, is trying to get that money out of Congress, get that money out of Google and Facebook through that law, to then turn around and take it and invest it in other different areas that are completely unrelated to news, and then squander those and to drive them into bankruptcy. They did that with Payless Shoe Source. They did that with Fred Pharmacy. That is what they do. They drive things into bankruptcy. So this is also a day to stand up and actually raise awareness for the fact that America's news ecosystem is being financialized, that is being destroyed by hedge funds and being destroyed by corporate greed. So we stand up to basically fight all of that, which is really hard for journalists to do because we all want to do our jobs. We all want to go out there and cover our beats. We love doing that. But it's time to also make a stand and make sure that Americans know that our news ecosystem is being destroyed by hedge funds and corporate greed.
I just want to add something to what John just said. You know, months ago, I read a story in Bloomberg about the efforts to get a little bit of the revenue that the platforms get from, you know, using our product to profit. You know, there have been bills in Congress, you know, attempting to do just that. And what struck me in this Bloomberg story is that the lobbyists for the platforms, for the tech people, actually made this argument. Why would you want to pass this? Because that money is just going to go into the pockets of Alden Global Cap. They actually said that. And that just, I think, points out the cynicism that we're up against, because financialization is a very cynical process.
We have a question about why the company said it wanted to eliminate the 401k match. Anybody want to take that?
Yeah, this is Mateline with the Tribune. The company at the bargaining table has told us that it is an alignment issue, meaning that they don't offer it at any of their other properties. Our position has been that when they bought us, they bought the 401k.
There's another question about, are we all working at home now? I know that answer varies across units, but Gavin, do you want to start with that one?
Sorry, which question?
Are you all working at home now? Do you still have an office in Tidewater?
We still have an office. We have a suite now. That's, you know, it's serviceable, but we have no physical presence in the Hampton Roads at all. Like the most noticeable building, which we're picketing in front of today, by the way, has been turned into an apartment complex called Pilot Place that uses the stylized P that was associated with our masthead. And so every single person I tell that I work at the newspaper, they assume we're dead because they don't see us anywhere. It's hard to find papers. The people that subscribe don't get their papers for like a month or so, and they can't talk to anyone on the phone. We have no physical presence in the community. No one knows where to go to talk to us. So the vast majority of our people work remotely. I go in the office more than anyone. And I know that everyone else works remotely. But we've organized this despite that. We have willingly gotten together to see each other face to face. And without that effort, this would not have happened. We would not have had 87% of our staff walking out in support of this, and a portion of that going to the picket line and being out upfront in public about what they're dealing with. So yeah, it's pretty bleak. I mean, I think we're doing better than a lot of people. Our office is a, you know, it's serviceable. It's pretty nice. Got a decent view, but the impact that this has had on our community has been, and just the standing of the paper in the community, is hugely detrimental. Everybody just, I mean, we're an afterthought. They think we're on the way out, and Alden has no plan to continue us into the future. It's managed decline. I could go on, but that's basically it.
What I will say for those of us who work in Chicago is that we do still have a physical office. It is at the printing press known as the Freedom Center. The Freedom Center is actually going to be bulldozed for a casino, the first in the city of Chicago that will be permanent. Somebody CQ that for me, please. But so we are in the Freedom Center for about another 6 months, I guess, as of today. And then we don't know where we're going next. We haven't yet heard from our management as to whether they will get us another office. Most people do not come into the Freedom Center yet, or at all, because it's not a very nice place to work. It does have desks, but we used to be in the Tribune Tower, which is similar to the situation in Tidewater, also now residences, and on the first floor home to the Museum of Ice Cream. And then we were in the Prudential Center, which Alden stopped paying rent on and got us evicted from. So most Tribune journalists are working from home or from the road. We've got a question here about momentum. Dave, did you want to answer that one?
Yeah, I'd love to. Thanks, Tim. The fact is, you know, for a long time, we didn't have momentum. It seemed bleak. The company wasn't moving, but I think collectively we just got kicked in the teeth so many times. And the last time we made good faith efforts at bargaining, and the company's bargainer basically said, well, you know, somebody's got to make a move. See you later. So, you know, today we're making a move. And it took a long time, and a lot of people getting kicked in the teeth, like I said. And we appreciate this is real. This is not some ginned up thing. It came honestly and organically over a lot of time. And we're in it together.
All right. Any other questions that we have? Speak now, forever hold your peace. All right. Well, thank you so much, everybody, for coming. Hopefully everybody has the press release, and I can drop my email in the chat in case an attendee of this call didn't get that for some reason. And there are several more media contacts on that document in case you want to follow up with any of the people you've heard here today, or anybody working across the chain to make this strike happen today. Thank you all so much.